tape.
So I'm Paul Mason. I'm a Guardian columnist and a writer and a journalist, and I've written a book called PostCapitalism.
You gave a talk for Sydney Ideas on can robots kill capitalism? What's the answer?
Well, the short answer is robots alone aren't going to kill capitalism, but the technology that has produced robotics and artificial intelligence and the dramatic cheapening of all information-related technologies is, I think, going to challenge capitalism. It's going to challenge it in three ways. It's going to, and already is, disrupting what we call the price mechanism. So the ability to form prices on goods that cost nothing to produce is quite difficult. They should be costing nothing. It's disrupting work because IT is replacing jobs faster than it creates new ones. And that's the first time any technology has ever done that. Remember, capitalism survives through technological innovation, but usually that technological innovation brings new needs, new jobs, more expensive goods and higher wages. Information technology does none of that. And the final thing is, information technology is giving us the means to reorganize the world. Above all, business. There's a theory, an interesting theoretical question in economics. Why do we need companies? It was asked in the 1920s and 30s. Right now, it's a real and concrete question because we can get together on an ad hoc, temporary basis and do anything using networks, including what a company does. And sometimes we can do it in a non-managed way, in a horizontal way, that is completely different from the normal structure of either business or politics.
So, are all jobs... Yes, get your coffee, so that's always better.
We're sitting here in a...
Okay, so we're sitting here in the coffee shop right on Bondi Beach in the rain.
In a thunderstorm.
In a thunderstorm, unlike Sydney's seen for a very long time. So, the jobs that are going, is that going to include the white-collar jobs, the professional jobs like lawyers?
Oxford University's research in 2013 showed that 47% of all jobs in a developed economy like the United States are susceptible to automation. And it starts with retail, people who work in shops, people who work in office management, and it ends with mental health social work. But in between, it's very much down to what can be done by a machine. And decisions increasingly can be done by machines. The kind of decisions lawyers, commercial lawyers take are fairly pre-programmed, and they're already using algorithms. I mean, a doctor, when you present with some ailment at your local doctor, they're effectively using, because all healthcare is now standardised to a certain service level, generally doctors are going to go, okay, there's a kind of set of Q&As about this. You have a skin rash. Where have you just been? What have you just done? A computer can do that. Now, what we would hope is that as computers take over the heavy lifting, human beings do the fine-tuning. Like a fighter pilot. He or she is not flying the plane. The fighter pilot is taking very advanced decisions about the combat that they're involved in or that they might be involved in. Now, that's a good example for us all. Plane flies itself. We are, I think, going to see middle-class jobs disappear. But right now, the weird thing is automation isn't our biggest problem. The biggest problem is we fear automation so much that we have created millions of jobs, such as the ones being done in this coffee bar where we're having coffee, that I don't think really need to exist. How come so many graduates have to do jobs serving coffee? When I was a kid, I was 25, you could barely find a cappuccino. Okay, there's a cappuccino on every corner. But I'm not convinced that is a great use of the time of a generation. And therefore, we've created lots and lots of jobs that do not need to exist because we're trying to keep people involved in the finance system and in the communication system, the two great extractors of profit from us, so your credit card and your mobile phone. You can't really have one if you don't have a regular or even an irregular job. And that's why we've created, without anybody announcing it, lots and lots of jobs that are pretty pointless.
So if the pointless jobs get automated, or even if they don't get automated, if most of the jobs are automated, the goods and services, and the people don't have jobs to pay for them, won't that destroy the economy and society?
Well, yes, I think it will, because when people look at the title of my book and they say, here's another guy predicting the end of capitalism, I say yes, and all the other ones have been wrong because technology proved them wrong. You know that Karl Marx predicted that by the 1840s, and this was on the basis of testimony from workers, they expected all skilled male workers to be removed from the cotton industry. The manufacturers had announced this. All male workers, these guys who go on strike and burn down our houses, they will be removed and replaced by children and women. 10 years later, there were more men in the cotton industry, despite the new machinery, because the men had captured the skills base. It always happens. It happens repeatedly. It happens in printing. It happens in engineering for 200 years. Now, on that basis, the labour movement has always been able to keep wages high during boom and bust, during periods of technological change. This is the first period of technological change where the jobs are just destroyed and the bargaining power of workers is destroyed whether they have unions or not. And I think that, therefore, we have to begin proactively designing a transition to a low-work society. And I know those themes have been around since the 1960s. It just so happens they are now going to be real themes. They're not futurology themes. They are now-ology themes.
So what possible futures do we have here? What's the solution for people who can't get a job because it's all automated? And how do you keep things going? Sorry about that.
Sorry, I've drunk a bit, but I'm drunk from that side. Right. Say that again, please.
Okay, so what sort of society do we have where it's low jobs but it still ticks over? How do people survive and how do things happen?
The idea of a citizen's basic income has come from left field to the centre of the discourse. Right now, the British Labour Party, which I'm a member of, since its move to the left, has become the first social democratic party to really take seriously basic income. Now, they're only going to study it, they're only going to model it. We may find one or two local areas begin a trial. There are trials in Utrecht in Holland, there's trials in Finland. We need to work out how this works. What's the right level? How does it interact with other supply, demand and incentivization schemes? But we have to do something to de-link work from wages. Or another way of putting it is a one-off subsidy for the rapid automation of the world. Productivity right now is languishing. Productivity is completely flatlining because we're keeping everybody in work and not using the technology. We need to reduce the working day, reduce the working week, and if possible, go to a situation where taxpayers' money is subventing, is actually giving a subsidy to people, everybody, regardless of whether they work or not.
So everybody gets an income that's above poverty level, whether they work or not, so that they can survive without work.
I think it'd be at poverty level to start with, because you want to incentivize people to work, but what we could do is reshape people's understanding of work-life balance. Work-life balance came in as an idea 20 years ago, and for most people it means some dad whose other half has a child is basically seeking 2 weeks off work to be to look after the young baby, or people go on do job sharing while they have young children. I think in future we'll see much more people able to think, okay, work-life balance is a lifetime issue. Okay, do I want to do a PhD? Do I want to take time out in my 30s to retrain or to just zen out? To be honest, because we have to live a long time. One of the other offshoots of healthcare, of information technology, is the advances in healthcare that will keep us not only alive longer, but healthy longer. This too has only just started. So if you're planning a life, even if you work till you're 70, a life that lasts till you're 95 is still going to be 25 years of freedom at the end. You need to work out how you're going to live there. And you may want to think that a working life of 18 or 21 to 70 is a long time. So work-life balance could involve taking strategic times out. It could be culturally acceptable to do that. We should call it a sabbatical. And in fact, the idea of the sabbatical goes right back to ancient times when people realised that sabbatical was a great way of organizing. 1 year in 7, you just take it out, organise your life, rethink, retrain. Life lived on a human scale. One of the things that drives me to have these ideas and promote this debate. Forever, but for 1,500 years after the birth of Jesus Christ, GDP per head flatlined. Then, in 200 years ago, it went into a 45-degree angle. We have been relentlessly getting better. Recently, it's in parts of the world, it's not vertical, but it's a very, very steep rise in GDP, real well-being per head. If we don't have the power to imagine what happens when that curve goes vertical, we just don't deserve to be the human race. When there is a relentless and exponential rise in well-being and in efficiency and productivity, why would we work 8 to 10 hours every day?
So we might need to, what do they call it? We might need to help people understand the transition. A lot of people are stuck in the idea they have to work for somebody at some job they don't like very much. What will people do when they can do anything?
Well, the French Marxist André Gortz once said, utopias based on work are over. But saying it and achieving it is a different thing. Not only is Marxism a utopia based on work, so is Labourism, social democracy. In a way, I would say many Christian Democrats have a utopia based on work. Some conservative parties, hard work, the Protestant work ethic. So all sections of politics have kind of got their heads around our identities are shaped by work. We're sitting here on Bondi Beach and it's a bad day, but there are still people out there on the waves surfing. If they have to come off that to go to work, they look sad. If you ask them, who are you? They'll go, teacher, lawyer, doctor, supermodel, artist. Yeah? But those work-based identities aren't everything. And increasingly in the networked society, what we'd see is people deploying multiple identities. I think this is a product of the digital world we live in, and that's good, because it puts the average person into the position that only a privileged person could live in, say, 100 years ago. Virginia Woolf, the feminist author, once said, the average... what did she say? Something like, Virginia Woolf, the feminist author, once said, something like the average intellectual has 7 identities. But now everybody can have 7 identities. And what that means is that that's the beginnings of the erosion of the identity based on work. And I think all my projects are proactive. We look at a tendency and say, let's do more of this, less of this. And I think we need to find ways culturally to promote identities that are not based on work.
We've got just over 10 minutes.
Great. Do you want to...
I understand. So, let me just have a look through here. So, what's the alternative if we don't put in a basic income and if we don't take account of what's going on, what's likely to happen?
Look, I don't only fetishize the basic income. It's one tool. Another tool, because the aim of a post-capitalist transition project is to make everything cheap. Once it's cheap, people need to do less work, full stop. However you divide it up. Now, one amazingly good way of making everything cheap is to provide some things via state services. People look at East Germany and Russia and they say, how terrible was that? And it was. I don't want to go back to that way. And yet there will be people all around where we're sitting letting out flats on Airbnb. And when you turn up, the furniture is exactly the same. In the sense that the uniformity, IKEA furniture in every one of 1,000 apartments around us, uniformity is something that people are more and more accepting. And the idea that, I don't really care about having my grandmother's sideboard for the rest of my life. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of people have moved a little bit beyond physical possessions in some way, and part of that is the cheapening of everything. People will share stuff far more easily than they used to do. Car sharing schemes in every town, bike sharing schemes in almost every big city. So if the state were to take a major step towards providing basic goods and services for people, we could all work less anyway. And what I mean by that is, the purpose of privatization turns out to be to make things expensive so private companies can make a guaranteed profit. If we said to underground transport systems, tram systems, not only charge the cost of production but subsidise, so undercut the market, this really matters to people who are in precarious work. Trade unionists, when they talk to precarious workers like Deliveroo drivers or Uber drivers, they say, look, yeah, of course I would like 5% extra on my hourly wage, but since it's crap anyway, the point would be make transport cheaper, make housing cheaper, make education cheap or free. And that's what I think the state has to do. So I'm not fetishizing the basic income, the state provision of basic goods. And yeah, they'll be pretty uniform, but you know what? We could make them amazing. In 20th century Vienna, the early 20th century Vienna, the kind of arts and crafts socialist movement there produced amazing goods, designed goods. It's one of the origins of Art Deco. Art Deco as a movement was to design basic goods for people, very cheap, but very beautifully and durably. I think we should return to some of those design principles.
And how does all this work in the times of Trump and Brexit?
So, my book is 9/10 futurology. 9/10 of it is about a transition I expect to take place over the next century. But the first chapter is about now. And in the first chapter, I predicted that if we don't give up free market economics, globalization will fragment. Because the free market economy, the neoliberal model as we call it, is creating stagnation. And once people realize that the global economy is heading for stagnation, it becomes logical to head for the exit from globalization. You steal, grab or borrow all the growth you can for yourself in the knowledge that somebody else's growth is no longer doing you automatically good. It could be taking growth away from you. In the global era, we understood if China grows, that's good for Britain, it's good for Germany. Now, Donald Trump is the first, and Brexit are both signifiers of people saying, okay, globalization is not unmitigatedly good for me, therefore let me adopt a national solution. It doesn't matter whether you agree with my theory of post-capitalism. You can be a mainstream socialist or a mainstream liberal. I think we can all unite in resisting Trump and in resisting the further breakup of the European Union. But right now, what has to happen, therefore, and I'm very conscious here of speaking to a German audience, there is one country in Europe that is, I would argue, marching just as blindly to oblivion as the American Wall Street liberals marched in November last year, and that is Germany. Because Germany needs to learn that when the IMF and OECD say, please reflate your economy by borrowing, stimulating, and lend to Greece and write debts off and do not keep imposing austerity on Southern Europe. There's a time limited period for that to work. After a while, those exhortations become useless because we could see Brexit this year. If there's Brexit, that will trigger another banking crisis in Europe. We could see Italian exit. Don't think that the Trumpite threat is just people like the Alternative für Deutschland or the Marine Le Pen's Front National. The real threat to Europe is breakup and then collapse. And the German political elite of both sides, red and blue, need to wake up.
And you mentioned in your talk about culture wars.
We've had culture wars in the United States and now some European countries for about 20 years. But Trump's program is to turn that culture war hot. I mean, in other words, we've got no low-level violence simmering away in America, a country with millions of guns. We need to stop that. We need to obviously use the rule of law to hedge Trump into a cage. But those of us on the left, his opponents, need to be really clear and understand that if a cycle of violence emerges out of what is now currently passive resistance, that will do nobody any good. Do not. You see, there are some people backing Trump who simply, like the big oil companies or the big banks, want a fast buck for themselves. but some of the people in his entourage really believe in a collapse and resurrection theory of America. It's called the fourth turning. And Steve Bannon believes in it. What does that mean? He believes that America has to go through another event as traumatic as the Civil War. Now, I think we need to basically deny him that wish.
Any final words?
Do you need some more questions?
Well, I'm really happy that you've done with the post-Brexit Trump era. I think that's probably what's going to be the most relevant.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit more about Europe then. A couple of things about Europe.
Yeah.
I think 2017 is going to be a critical year for Europe because liberalism, as it were, centrism, is under great threat. Now, I would urge anybody listening to this to now question whether clinging to the orthodoxies of the Lisbon Treaty is worth it. I think we could have saved Britain as part of Europe had we proactively ripped up Lisbon and started again. There's not enough consent for what Lisbon means, because Lisbon means austerity. Lisbon means policies that promote the impacts of globalization onto failing industries. In Britain now, one of the reasons it's very hard for us to argue to go back in to the single market is that we want to save our steel industry. We want to save our fishing industry. I think Europe's going to... I would say to the leading voices in Europe, less Europe is the way to save Europe. Less globalization, as we already know from TPP and TIPS and all the rest of it, less globalization is the way to save globalization. That's hard to get your head around if you're sitting in a very nice full employment town in Western Germany. But believe me, the forces that brought Trump to power are there. In Hungary, they're in power in Hungary, they're in power in Poland. And if you want to see this magnificent project of post-war Europe fall apart, just stick to the Lisbon Treaty. It will do the rest. It will destroy Europe.
Well, Paul Mason, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.